Now in level 1 here, we want to cover over some of the basic things you can do to modify your forms. So for example, I have my customers form here, letter M, I put in there for modify. So when you double click open it up, it's just basically one block here. What if I want to move these fields around? Well, I'll show you how to modify it. First of all, we want to go to the design view, right click, and then go down and left click on design view. And you have the background grid here. Of course we have the field list over to the right, but I have all the fields that I need on my form, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. Now if for whatever reason you need more form or more of a grid here to move your fields down, just hover over the bottom part of the grid until your pointer turns into two arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag and stretch it down so you get more form here. First of all, we need to define what we're looking at. All these boxes here, they're called controls. A control box is something that's pulling data from, in this case, a table, and it's based on the customer's table. And then to the left-hand side, you have what are called labels. That just shows us that when we go back to the form view, and I click on the view button here, that when I'm in a field here, or the control box, and it's showing the data, in this case the 31201, without the label here, I wouldn't know what it means, which is actually the customer ID. So again, we're going to right-click and go back to the design view, and we're going to move some of these around. If you want to go ahead and move any one of these fields around, just simply click on it to select it, and then hover over the border until you get the four-way arrow. Once you get the four-way arrow, it can move in any direction here, up, down, left, or right, by simply clicking and holding that four-way arrow and dragging to the right or over and down. Not only does it drag the control here, but also brings along with it the label. However, if you want to create more spacing or close the gap between the label and the control, then in the upper left-hand corner you see that tiny little square there on the control or on the label. Just hover over that till you get a four-way arrow, then go ahead and click on it, hold it with your left mouse button and drag it in, up, down, over, and that way you can actually manipulate or separate the control from the label here. And it's the same thing on the control. Go ahead and click in the upper left hand corner, drag it around here, and you can move that closer to its label. And then if you want to move both of them at the same time, again just click on the border of either one of them and you can click and drag them both at the same time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and click and select the customer name and click and drag it over to the right hand side, and I need to click and drag it over just a little bit more. Now as long as it's selected, instead of using my mouse I can actually use my arrow keys. I can arrow over to the right, arrow over to the left. If I hold down the control key while I use the arrow keys, the movement is in smaller increments. Let me go ahead and move the address box, and we'll say the address, we'll just get that out of the way. And let's put the phone numbers up here and the fax. I can move both at the same time if I just click in the upper left hand corner and drag till that box encompasses both the labels and the control box. Everything's selected. Once everything is selected, not just the control boxes but their actual labels, corresponding labels, then I can click on any one of the borders and click and drag both of them up there and dump it right, let's say there. That's called marqueeing. When you click and drag and you create a box, a selection box or a marquee box around what you want to select and let go, and it selects all of them. Click off in a blank area to deselect them. Another way of doing it is hovering over here in the vertical ruler. You see that black arrow? Once I click, it shoots out a line, doesn't it? It's shooting it right through the city's label and its control box. If I click and drag, I can stretch and open up that selection and let go, and it selects everything horizontally that's within its path. Also, I can do it vertically. Click on the drop down arrow, and if I do it right, I can select just the labels. Okay, but in this case, what I want to be able to do is maybe move the city over just a little bit, click and drag the state over here, and then click and drag the postal code over just a bit. I'm going to give you some of the basics here because later on we're going to learn how to modify our forms more in depth or in detail, but this is just to get you started in level 1 to know that yes, you can move your fields around. And of course you can click on the control box to shrink it up. Now the states are just two-letter abbreviations. For like Utah, it's UT, for Arizona, AZ. So what I want to be able to do is I want to hover over the right side of that control box until I find my two-way arrow. It's on the right middle of the control box, not the upper right hand corner. As it goes in the upper right hand corner, I get the diagonal arrow. I want the arrow that just says it can go in or out horizontally by clicking and dragging. And notice when I click and drag, you'll see something interesting in the lower left hand corner. And again, we'll cover this later on in the other levels, level 2 and 3 here. But if you notice in the lower left hand corner down here when I click and drag it, it's going to show you how many characters when I drag in that it can contain. I only need basically, well, 2 or 3 characters to type in the 2 letters for each state, right? Like UT for Utah. So if I click and drag, watch that lower left hand corner, and you see how many characters that can fit in there in that control box where that will be revealed. And of course this can also be based on the font size, so if I have a larger font size it may not be representative of what I actually see down here, but I can get it close. I can click and drag and shrink that up. Then I can click in the upper left hand corner of the state label, click and drag when I get that four-way arrow to move just the label in, because when I click on the border it actually moves both the label and its corresponding control box, and I don't want to do that. So I can go ahead and click on the undo button, of course, and move it back to where it was. So after moving all this around, let me show you one other thing that we'll probably cover in later levels, but that can be very helpful, at least for now. Call it an extra bonus, as it were. But if I want to go ahead and let's say we move it back to the way it was, or close to it, state, and then zip code, and we want to put the address up here, somewhere along there. Oh, and the customer name. So I want to click and drag to select both of these and use my arrow key to kind of nudge them down. In fact, if I click and drag and I select all of these, I can nudge them down because I want to make room right here to put my customer name back in. So I click on the box. It doesn't matter if it's on the label box or the control box here. Just click on the border and then you can click and drag it, move it back in. And notice when I move it, the only outline you see around that four-way arrow is just the control box, not the label. You just have to imagine the label and make room for the label when you drop it off right here, that there's going to be the label on the left-hand side of it. Next, to be able to line these up correctly, I want to be able to have the labels all right aligned here and the control box is all left aligned. What I can do is I can click and drag on the horizontal part of the ruler and make the selections for just the labels. And as long as my line is cutting through one of the labels and the selection doesn't have to be beyond it, just has to at least cut through it, it'll actually select all the labels. Now, you can do this one of two ways. You can either click off in a blank area, of course ignoring what I just did, and move it and say, well, that's about right there, and this is going to be about right here, you know, and eyeball it and try to make sure you got your mouse lined up just right. Or you can do what I'm doing, is select all your labels, and then come up here on the corresponding contextual tab, the Arrange tab, and then come to the Control Alignment group and say, I want to line all the labels up and do a right align. So when I click on it, it lines them all up using right align. Or I could do left align where it lines them all up so all their edges are left aligned here, but right align works for me. So now I have to work with the controls here. So to do this, I want to click and drag. So these two lines that you see shooting down from the horizontal ruler actually cut through at any one point or part of one of the control boxes. So now I have all the control boxes, right? The only problem I'm going to run into if I left align all this is what's the furthest one, what control box is the furthest to the left, because that's where they're all going to align left to, and it's this one. They're going to be like, wow, really close. So I'm going to click off in a blank area and grab the upper left hand corner of this control box, bump it over, grab upper left hand handle of this control box and drag it over. And I think I'd like them all spaced about yay much, you know, about this far apart from each other. Maybe the city could be just actually, the city is, let's see now. Okay, it looks like it's a tie between the address and state. So if I align all these control boxes, it's going to be either address or state, the closest one here, and align everything off the left-hand side of those control boxes that are closest to the left. So let me click and drag in the horizontal ruler, so I get my line selections, and it cuts through these boxes and it selects all the control boxes. Then I come up here in the Control Alignment group, click left, and they left align. Well, you also, if you haven't noticed, you have your line top and line bottom. So, for example, you see how state's just aligned a little bit over the state label. If I want to bring both of them into alignment, their tops, then I just have to click and shoot a line through both of those, and then come up here to the Control Alignment grid and say align them to the top. It looks perfect, so it looks like they're balanced now. One's not down or the other one's further up. Okay, let's see what this looks like in the actual form view. So I'm going to come up here. I can't do it here. I'm on the Arrange tab, so I can't change views here. I mean, I could right click, of course, and then come down here and left click on Form View, and there it is. I'm almost back to where it is. I'm going to have to measure these up just a little bit more and create equal spacing. In fact, in the next level, we'll cover how to create equal spacing between all your fields here, how to add objects, other buttons where you can actually have a little close button on your form. And actually on your forms you can create pop-up forms, so when somebody opens up your database, the first thing they see is a nice form here without the tab. So we can do a lot more in the next levels. But for right now, to keep it simple, let's go ahead and tab through our fields here. Notice how it's tabbing. It went from customer ID to customer name, phone, fax. Of course, you see how it tabbed and it skipped over city, went down to address, and then it goes back up to city. But I want to show you one last thing. You can actually change the order of when the user tabs, what field it's going to go to. So if I right click and I go back to the design view, and to change the tab order here, I'm going to go to the Arrange tab and then come in here in the Control Layout group and click on the tab order. Now if you click on Auto Order, what that does is it actually realigns the fields. Remember how it used to tab? It went from the address then to the city. So when I tabbed from fax, it went to the address then to city. When I click on auto order, it actually looks at the form and how it's laid out, and it assumes that you're going from top to bottom. That's why the city is now first here. When I click on it, you can see the city. So if you don't like it the way it is here, you can always click like I did here on city to select it, and then click again and hold down your left mouse button and drag this, let's say, below state. And then of course if I hit auto order, city's going to be realigned back up again because that's right before address, and so it's going to assume, boom, that's what you want it because that's where you have it ordered in your form from top to bottom here. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and select customer name, click on the row header so it selects the whole row, then click on the row header again and let's drag it down just below state. Click OK. Let's go ahead and right click and go back to the form view. So when I tab, it shouldn't go to the customer name. That should be, well, just before the postal code. So if I hit tab, it skips over it, goes to phone, fax, city, address, state, then the customer name, then I hit tab, it goes to the postal code. So you can control what fields people are going to go to next, that is if they use their tab key. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.